In May, I started animating My Hero Academia Chapter 379, and a week ago, I finally finished. I had just come off of trying to animate Chapter 369, and even though there are some cuts I'm very proud of, I failed. I was super disorganized, and instead of trying to storyboard scenes and making sure everything was flowing and consistent, I would just have a cool idea, and then I would just animate the idea. I would skip multiple panels until I just lost my whole drive to animate. I was burnt out. So my brilliant self decided to learn absolutely nothing and do the exact same thing. I'm still very happy with how the animation turned out as a whole. But there's some cuts of animation that look really good and some that just aren't put together in a clear and coherent way. But I'm still going to try and explain my animation process on my favorite cuts. Starting with... For this cut, I knew I couldn't just have rocks flying at Deku for no apparent reason. So I needed Shigaraki to do something. This is actually the most recent cut I animated. I started with his hand opening, and then I wanted to have a sort of like perspective switch, like a zoom out to Shigaraki, hitting like an Obanari punch pose. Then I wanted to have a sort of Obari punch. An Obari punch is where the face zooms by the camera, and then the fist follows. So I just gathered a bunch of muscle references and hand references, and for the cleanup and line work, I kind of just tossed consistency out the window. I made the muscle line works like completely inconsistent. I was heavily inspired by Arifumi Amai's Levi cut for this scene. I wanted to show Deku maneuvering around the rocks while also charging up Fajin. I actually did most of the drawings in a road trip to Idaho, where I got to hike around in a green cloak and spin logs over my head. It was pretty fun. I got to see Yellowstone and all that, but anyways, it caused the line work to look really weird. Not so fun story. While I was recording the reference footage for this scene, I accidentally rolled my ankle for no apparent reason. I just tripped over my own foot. It's kind of funny. And even though the line work doesn't look too good, I am still proud of the character motion and the effects that I did. I think I did a really good job with that. If you watched MHA Season 7, you definitely remember Kohai Hirota's cut of Bakugo stepping over and walking in front of the camera. This is what inspired me to do a similar shot with Deku stepping over the camera and walking towards Shigaraki. So I ran down to my park at around 9 PM and I filmed this reference footage. After animating the baseline work, I really did not want to add a lot of shading to it, so I just made sure there was some lightning in the distance. And then later I added Black Whip and I used 3D CGI for the background. Honestly, the 3D CGI was not that high of quality, which kind of led to the next shot not being so consistent, but I really like the overall weight of the drawings. Before I realized I really wanted to start dedicating myself to animation, I had tried coloring this panel as soon as it came out. And now, almost 2 years later, I'm finally going to be able to animate it. My original plan was to have some hand-drawn background animation, but my rough was way too ambitious, and I wanted to learn more about 3D CG for use in later projects. While both Shigaraki and Deku are standing still, I wanted to use this cut as a way to work with my fabric animation skills. So I used Shoto Yamazaki's shading as reference, and I drew 2 shading layers of both of the characters for when lightning strikes. For UA High in the background, I realized that I did not have experience with smoke animation. So I found a good reference from JJK Season 2, and I tried my hand at it. I'm pretty proud of how it turned out. However, I do wish I had not messed with the color opacity at the end of the loop, and I wish it was slower. While I was doing all of this, I was also binge watching Blender tutorials, and while I wasn't exactly a complete novice at Blender, having worked with it before, I still wanted to make sure I used the right stylized materials. So about 3 days, I put all this together, and for the background, I drew it in Clip Studio on a really high resolution plane. Then I imported it into Blender and deformed it to look like a sort of half sphere. Then I animated the character movement, imported the animations into the environment, and then rendered out each individual layer, the sky, buildings, ground, objects, Black Whip, Shigaraki, Deku, and the floating UA, and shoved them all into After Effects. For the lightning, I used the lasso tool again and found a slow motion reference while scrolling on TikTok. Then I used a bunch of fractal noise textures for the mist, color graded as best as I could, and then called it a day. While these cuts were high priority, I did not have the other cuts that I had accumulated over time done, so I rushed them. For most, I skipped shading and was pulling insane hours, making sure the animation was fully done and coloring all. And finally, after way too long, it was done. I had animated, colored, and composited probably well over 20 cuts. I also had to cut multiple animations just because they either didn't make sense in the scene or I just didn't have time to finish them. While the animation was done, there was still one more step.
Hey.
Hello. This is ButteredPopcorn. He's a voice actor who reached out to me on one of my latest videos, and when I saw his videos and voice acting, I was blown away by how good he sounded. So of course, I accepted. What was your overall reasoning or things you had in mind when you were coming up with the voices for this animation?
So keep it in mind, I was definitely vividly trying to compare the manga scene, like what it was said in the manga, and then I was able to pull from the recent anime adaptation, especially when it came to like Deku's lines and how they were said. I fed off what the voice actor in the Japanese dub said and how they said it, and that fueled my interpretation for how I went about it. And just when it came to like Deku and Shigaraki in general, those are two characters that I love them. And when it comes to like Shigaraki, like I just love his energy, like the grit, the feel. But when it came to Deku too, they're like two peas in a pod, you know, like they reflect each other. So I wanted to, especially with me voicing both, I went for that kind of feeling of these characters parallel, they bounce off each other. Let me kind of match their energy and their tone. And that's what kind of went into my thinking for getting the scene right.
I see. Did you take inspiration from just the Japanese or also some of the English dub? Or
Definitely the dub too. I remember to get me into Shigaraki's lines, I remembered in the dub back when in season 6, when Shigaraki says his speech to the heroes where he's like standing up, it's just like, you just don't understand. That was like what I used to like get me myself into the mindset of Tomura Shigaraki. I did want to say when it came to voicing Deku, I put more emphasis on what I could do instead of trying to match the voice completely. Doing impressions will get you a long way. Like if you can nail an impression, you saw like Bugs Bunny or something like that, it can get you a long way. But you have to have the acting behind it. And when it comes to voice acting, there already is a Justin Briner. And his Deku voice turns out to really just be his normal voice, just pitched up a little bit higher because he already has that good teenage voice. Like that's why he's Deku. So I want to focus on coming from a place of what I could do with myself first, and then thinking about the ideology of Izuku Midoriya and his origins and what it entails for his character. And I didn't want to do what a lot of meme voices do with Deku already. I am Izuku Midoriya. This is our Hero Academia. Like just silly things like that. I wanted to make sure that like if it's gonna be Deku, it feels like Deku. It feels like a smash or it feels original. And and when it came to that scene and a lot of what you do already, you make original scenes.
just another short question. Which of the two was your favorite character to voice? Was it Shigaraki or was it Deku?
Coming onto the project, I definitely had Shigaraki more in mind. I love everything that builds around Shigaraki. His weight, his emotion, the reason he does what he does, how society turned him into what he is. So Shigaraki is a fan favorite of mine, and I was definitely so excited to voice him. But when I realized I was gonna do a smash because you had added that part two with Deku, I was like, oh my god, this is a dream come true. I knew like I could play a really good Shigaraki, but when it came to Deku, I was like, holy shit. I get to do a smash. Like, this is amazing. Like, I gotta say, between the two, it's probably like 51% Shigaraki just has that extra leg up, but Deku's still like there for me. Like, I love voicing both. It was a pleasure to work with you, honestly. It was very much enjoyable, man. Like, I was an absolute delight, and I'd be happy to, come back and do it again because this was an amazing experience.
Happy to hear that. And after throwing together some sound effects, I was finally done with the animation. Also, quick ending. I'm going to be putting together a team. I don't know when this is going to happen or how this is going to happen, but I'm going to do it. And I'm going to animate Shigaraki versus Deku in their own original fight. I'm definitely going to learn from my mistakes more on my next project. I'm going to storyboard all my scenes. In between, I'm going to color. I'm going to do all the steps according to the animation process because when I do them and I do it right, it turns out beautiful. I love how it turns out when I follow the process instead of just trying to skip scenes or trying to skip between panels just because I have a random idea that looks good. My next project is going to be the most ambitious and look the best it ever has.